Sirens pierced the afternoon air like screaming banshees, their wail bouncing off the towering steel frames of roller coasters and spinning rides. Red and blue lights flashed against the candy-striped facades of game booths, casting an apocalyptic glow over what had been, just moments before, the happiest place in the state. Parents grabbed their children and ran toward exit gates, some stumbling over dropped cotton candy and abandoned stuffed animals. The massive Ferris wheel groaned to a halt, its colorful gondolas swaying gently in the summer breeze, as if nothing had happened at all. Emergency vehicles swarmed the parking lot of Wonderland Springs, the state's largest amusement park, their engines revving and radios crackling with urgent dispatches. Paramedics unloaded stretchers while police officers shouted instructions through megaphones, their voices barely audible over the chaos. The Thunder Mountain roller coaster, which had been packed with screaming teenagers just 15 minutes earlier, now sat empty and silent, its safety sensors blinking red across every car. Everyone remained calm and proceed to the nearest exit. A security guard yelled, his voice hoarse from repetition. Families pushed through turnstiles, some crying, others arguing with staff members who had no more information than they did. The acrid smell of overheated brakes mixed with the sweet aroma of funnel cake, creating a surreal sensory cocktail that would haunt visitors' memories for years to come. In the midst of this pandemonium, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer purse clutched to her chest stood near the Thunder Mountain entrance, speaking rapidly into her phone. Her voice carried over the noise with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Yes, I'm telling you, I saw the whole thing," she insisted, her manicured finger pointing dramatically at a small figure being comforted by his parents nearby. That child, the disabled one. He was doing something to the safety controls. I know what I saw. 3 hours earlier, the Rodriguez family had walked through those same turnstiles with the kind of excitement that only comes with a long-awaited family outing. Maria Rodriguez held her 8-year-old son Miguel's hand as they studied the park map, while her husband Carlos shouldered a backpack full of sunscreen, water bottles, and the portable communication device that helped Miguel navigate the world despite his autism and limited verbal abilities. "Thunder Mountain first," Maria asked, kneeling down to Miguel's eye level. The boy's eyes lit up at the sight of the towering coaster, and he nodded enthusiastically, his hands flapping in the stimming motion that meant pure joy. Carlos smiled and ruffled his son's dark hair. "Thunder Mountain it is, buddy." The line stretched for nearly an hour, winding through carefully designed switchbacks, adorned with fake mining equipment and Western-themed decorations. Miguel stood patiently between his parents, occasionally reaching out to touch the wooden railings or examining the intricate details of the artificial rock formations. His fascination with textures and patterns had always been one of his most endearing traits, even if some people didn't understand it. Behind them, a woman in her mid-40s tapped her foot impatiently, checking her phone every few seconds. Her name was Karen Whitfield, though she preferred to be called Mrs. Whitfield by service workers and anyone she considered beneath her social station. She wore expensive athleisure wear and carried a handbag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her teenage daughter Ashley stood beside her, eyes glued to her own phone, occasionally rolling her eyes at her mother's increasingly loud complaints. "This is ridiculous," Karen announced to no one in particular, though loud enough for everyone within 20 feet to hear. "An hour wait, at these prices. This is exactly why we should have gotten the VIP passes." Ashley sighed without looking up from her screen. "Mom, you said the VIP passes were a waste of money." "That was before I knew we'd be stuck behind." Karen's voice trailed off as she watched Miguel reach out to touch a section of the queue railing, his fingers tracing the carved wooden pattern. "Is that child going to touch everything?" she muttered, her voice carrying just far enough for Maria to catch the edge of disapproval. Maria turned slightly, offering a polite smile. He's just curious about textures. It helps him process new environments. Karen's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. Well, maybe he should learn to keep his hands to himself. This is a public place. Carlos's jaw tightened, but Maria placed a gentle hand on his arm. Miguel isn't hurting anything, she said calmly. The railings are meant to be touched. By normal children, maybe, Karen replied, her voice gaining volume. But special needs kids can be unpredictable. They don't understand consequences. The line had grown quiet around them, other families pretending not to listen while their attention focused entirely on the unfolding confrontation. Ashley finally looked up from her phone, her face flushing with embarrassment. Mom, can you please just drop it? But Karen was just getting started. She had spent her entire adult life perfecting the art of manufactured outrage, and she had found her target. I'm sorry, but I have every right to express my concerns about safety. This is supposed to be a family-friendly environment. Miguel, sensing the tension in his parents' voices and the hostile energy emanating from the woman behind him, began to rock slightly on his feet, a self-soothing behavior that his parents recognized immediately. Maria knelt beside him, speaking in the gentle, rhythmic tone that always helped him feel secure. It's okay, mijo. We're almost to the fun part. The line moved forward, and for a blessed 10 minutes, Karen seemed to have exhausted her complaints. The family enjoyed a peaceful stretch, with Miguel becoming increasingly excited as they approached the loading platform. The massive roller coaster towered above them, its red and gold cars climbing the first steep hill with mechanical precision. When they finally reached the ride platform, Miguel's eyes went wide with wonder at the complex machinery surrounding them. The loading area hummed with activity as ride operators helped guests into their seats and checked safety harnesses. Miguel watched, fascinated, as hydraulic systems hissed and electronic displays blinked with status updates. Next group, please step forward, called Jake Morrison, a college sophomore who had been working at the park for 2 summers. He had developed a genuine fondness for helping families with special needs children, having a younger brother with Down syndrome himself. How many in your party? 3, Carlos replied, his hand gently guiding Miguel toward the loading area. Miguel hesitated for a moment, overwhelmed by the sensory input of flashing lights, mechanical sounds, and the excited chatter of other riders. But his parents' calm presence gave him courage, and he stepped forward to examine the safety harness system with intense curiosity. Jake noticed Miguel's fascination and smiled. Pretty cool how all the safety systems work together, isn't it? These harnesses are tested every single day to make sure everyone stays safe. Miguel nodded solemnly, running his fingers along the padded restraint as Jake helped secure it. The boy's methodical attention to detail was actually comforting to watch. Jake thought, so different from the teenagers who usually flopped into their seats without a care in the world. Behind them, Karen Whitfield was growing increasingly agitated as she watched the interaction. Her mind, always primed to find fault and assign blame, began spinning a narrative that would soon spiral far beyond her control. She pulled out her phone and began recording, though she wasn't entirely sure why yet. The ride launched with its characteristic sudden acceleration, carrying the Rodriguez family up the first massive hill. Miguel's initial fear melted into pure delight as they crested the peak and plunged down the other side, his laughter mixing with the screams of other riders. For 3 minutes and 47 seconds, they were simply a family enjoying a perfect moment together. When the ride returned to the station, Miguel was beaming, his hands flapping with excitement as his parents helped him out of his seat. "Again," he said, one of his few spoken words, and his parents laughed with relief and joy. "Maybe after we try some other rides," Maria suggested, knowing that too much of anyone's stimulus could overwhelm him. As they walked toward the exit, Jake called out, "Have a great day! Come back anytime!" But his friendly farewell was interrupted by a commotion near the control booth. Karen Whitfield stood pointing at the safety control panel, her voice rising to a near shriek. "I saw him. The disabled boy. He was touching the controls when you weren't looking." Jake turned, confused. "Ma'am, I was watching the whole time. The young man never went near the control panel." "Don't lie to me." Karen's face was flushed red with manufactured rage. "I have it on video. He was tampering with the safety systems. This whole park could be compromised." Other families began to gather, drawn by the increasingly loud argument. Carlos stepped forward, his protective instincts flaring. "My son never touched any controls. He was secured in his seat the entire time." "Of course you'd say that," Karen sneered. "You people never take responsibility when your special needs kids cause problems." The phrase "you people" hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Maria felt her face grow hot with anger and hurt, while Miguel pressed closer to his father, sensing the hostility directed at his family. Ashley tugged at her mother's arm, pleading in a whisper, "Mom, please stop. You're embarrassing us." But Karen had crossed a line, and she wasn't interested in retreat. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice taking on the breathless urgency of someone reporting a life-threatening emergency. "Hello, yes. I need to report a terrorist threat at Wonderland Springs Amusement Park. A mentally disturbed child has sabotaged the roller coaster safety systems. We need immediate evacuation." Jake's face went pale. As a ride operator, he had been trained in emergency protocols, and any suggestion of safety system tampering triggered immediate shutdown procedures, regardless of whether the claim seemed credible. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and explain exactly what you think you saw." "I don't think anything," Karen shouted, her phone still pressed to her ear as she described the incident to the emergency dispatcher. "I know what I saw. That child has special needs, and everyone knows they can be violent and unpredictable. He could have killed hundreds of people." The dispatcher's voice crackled through Karen's phone speaker, loud enough for nearby families to hear. "Ma'am, are you reporting actual tampering with safety equipment or suspicious behavior?" "Both," Karen replied without hesitation. The child was accessing control panels while the operators were distracted. This is exactly the kind of thing terrorists would use, sending in someone who looks innocent but is actually dangerous. Within minutes, Jake received a call on his radio from park security. The protocol was clear and inflexible. Any report of safety system tampering, no matter how implausible, triggered immediate ride shutdown and investigation. "Thunder Mountain, this is Control. Shut down all operations immediately and secure the area for inspection." Jake's hand shook as he initiated the emergency shutdown sequence, knowing that this single action would cascade through the entire park's operations. The Thunder Mountain cars that were halfway up the first hill slowly rolled back to the station, disappointing dozens of riders who had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of the largest amusement park crisis in state history. The Rodriguez family found themselves suddenly surrounded by security personnel, their pleasant day transformed into a nightmare of questions and accusations. Miguel, overwhelmed by the noise and hostile energy, began to retreat into himself, his stimming becoming more pronounced as his anxiety spiked. "Sir, ma'am, we need to ask your family to come with us," said Officer Jennifer Hayes, one of the first responders to arrive at the scene. Her tone was professional, but firm, and Carlos could see in her eyes that she was simply following protocol rather than acting on personal belief. "This is insane," Maria whispered, her arm protectively around Miguel's shoulders. "Our son didn't do anything wrong." Karen, emboldened by the official response to her call, stepped closer to the security officers. "I have video evidence on my phone. That child was definitely accessing restricted areas. You need to search them for weapons or tools." Officer Hayes glanced at Karen with the expression of someone who had dealt with many false alarms over the years. But procedure demanded that she treat every report seriously until proven otherwise. "Ma'am, we'll review any evidence you have. In the meantime, I need everyone to remain calm while we sort this out." But calm was the last thing anyone felt as news of the security incident spread through the park's communication systems. Ride operators began receiving shutdown orders for attractions throughout Wonderland Springs. And then, the directive expanded beyond the single park. State safety officials, concerned about the possibility of a coordinated attack on amusement park infrastructure, ordered the immediate closure of all 23 amusement parks across the state, pending investigation. The media response was swift and merciless. Within 30 minutes of Karen's 911 call, local news stations had dispatched helicopters to film the evacuation of Wonderland Springs. The footage was dramatic and terrifying, families running with crying children, emergency vehicles racing through empty parking lots, and the ghostly sight of motionless roller coasters against the sky. This is Channel 7 News, with breaking coverage of what appears to be a terrorist threat against the state's amusement park system, announced anchor Susan Chen from the newsroom. "We're receiving reports that a child with special needs may have tampered with safety systems at Wonderland Springs, leading to the evacuation of not just that facility, but all amusement parks statewide." The story exploded across social media with the kind of viral intensity that destroys lives in real time. "Special needs terrorist" began trending within hours, accompanied by increasingly hysterical speculation about the weaponization of disabled children. Conservative commentators seized on the story as evidence of liberal policies gone wrong, while progressive voices struggled to combat the narrative without seeming to minimize legitimate safety concerns. In a sterile conference room at Wonderland Springs, the Rodriguez family sat across from a team of investigators, lawyers, and park officials. Miguel had grown increasingly nonverbal as the stress mounted, communicating only through gestures and the occasional whispered word to his parents. Maria held his hand, while Carlos answered the same questions over and over again. "Mr. Rodriguez, can you walk us through your son's exact movements from the time you entered the queue until you exited the ride?" asked Detective Robert Kim, a 20-year veteran who had seen enough false accusations to approach this case with healthy skepticism. Carlos rubbed his temples, exhaustion evident in his voice. "For the 100th time, Miguel stayed with us the entire time. He never left our sight, never approached any control panels, never touched anything except the queue railings and his safety harness. And the ride operator can confirm this." Detective Kim consulted his notes. "Jake Morrison was with us through the entire loading process," Maria added. "He even complimented Miguel on how carefully he examined the safety harness." Detective Kim nodded, making additional notes. In his experience, the most outrageous accusations often came from the least reliable witnesses, and Karen Whitfield's increasingly elaborate story had raised several red flags during her interview. Meanwhile, in another conference room, Karen was holding court with a growing audience of investigators, reporters, and self-appointed experts on terrorism and special needs children. Her story had evolved considerably since her initial 911 call, now including detailed descriptions of Miguel's suspicious behavior and claims that she had witnessed him using specialized tools to access safety systems. "I've done my research," Karen declared, her phone displaying a collection of hastily Googled articles about autism and behavioral challenges. Children with these conditions can have obsessions with mechanical systems. They can be taught to do things without understanding the consequences. This has all the hallmarks of a coordinated attack using human assets that no one would suspect. Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a child psychologist who had been called in to consult on the case, listened to Karen's theories with growing alarm, not at the possibility of terrorism, but at the dangerous mischaracterization of autism spectrum disorders that was being broadcast to millions of viewers. "Mrs. Whitfield," Dr. Hoffman interjected, "nothing you've described suggests malicious intent or coordinated activity. Many children with autism are fascinated by mechanical systems, but that fascination typically manifests as observation and learning, not sabotage." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying you don't take terrorist threats seriously? Because I have video evidence." The promised video evidence, when finally reviewed by investigators, showed exactly what Jake Morrison and the Rodriguez family had described Miguel examining the queue railings, waiting patiently in line, and being carefully secured in his safety harness by a ride operator. At no point did the footage show him near any control panels or engaging in any suspicious behavior. But by the time experts had reviewed the evidence, the damage was already spreading like wildfire across the internet. Conspiracy theorists spun elaborate tales about special needs, children being trained as unwitting terrorists. Disability rights advocates found themselves defending not just Miguel Rodriguez, but the entire concept of inclusive public spaces. And millions of families with special needs, children watched in horror as their daily struggles were twisted into something sinister and threatening. The investigation took an unexpected turn on the second day, when park engineers conducting their mandatory safety inspection discovered something that changed everything. Chief Safety Engineer Marcus Thompson had been meticulously examining every component of the Thunder Mountain control systems when he noticed something odd about one of the override panels. "Detective Kim, you need to see this," Marcus called from the control booth. He pointed to a section of the panel where several screws appeared to have been recently disturbed. "These access points have been tampered with, but not in the way the witness described." Detective Kim leaned in for a closer look. "What are you seeing?" "Someone with a portable screwdriver accessed this panel within the last few days. The scratches on the screw heads are fresh, and there are metal shavings on the floor that match the tool marks." Marcus paused, consulting his maintenance logs. "But here's the thing. No scheduled maintenance was performed on these systems recently." "So someone did tamper with the controls?" "Yes, but not during yesterday's incident. This tampering happened earlier, probably within the last week, and it required specific tools and knowledge of our systems. This wasn't random vandalism or a child's curiosity. This was deliberate sabotage designed to cause exactly the kind of malfunction that would shut down the entire ride system." Detective Kim felt his pulse quicken. "Are you saying someone intentionally created a situation that would trigger emergency protocols?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And whoever did it knew enough about our safety systems to create a malfunction that would look accidental but would require complete system shutdown. This was premeditated." The security footage review that followed was exhaustive and revelatory. Cameras throughout the park had captured thousands of hours of footage from the past week, and investigators began the painstaking process of identifying everyone who had been near the Thunder Mountain control systems. What they found, buried in footage from 3 days earlier, was shocking in its clarity. Karen Whitfield, easily recognizable in her designer clothes and distinctive hairstyle, was clearly visible on camera approaching the control booth during a previous visit to the park. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., long after the park had closed to the public. How did she get into the park after hours? Detective Kim asked Marcus Thompson as they reviewed the footage frame by frame. She wouldn't have needed to break in, Marcus replied, his voice grim with realization. Her ex-husband works for the State Tourism Board. He has after-hours access credentials for conducting inspections and promotional work. Further investigation revealed that Karen had been having a bitter custody dispute with her ex-husband, David Whitfield, who served as the state's director of amusement park safety. David's job required him to conduct regular inspections of park facilities, and his access credentials would have allowed him to enter any park in the state at any time. She stole his access card, Detective Kim concluded after interviewing David Whitfield. He reported it missing 2 weeks ago, but assumed he had simply misplaced it. He never imagined his ex-wife would use it to sabotage a park. The motive became clearer as investigators dug deeper into Karen's background. She had been involved in a series of frivolous lawsuits over the past 5 years, each targeting businesses or institutions she claimed had discriminated against her or provided inadequate service. Her pattern was always the same: create or exaggerate an incident, demand attention and compensation, and move on to the next target when her demands weren't met. But this time, her scheme had gone far beyond simple fraud. By sabotaging the ride systems and then blaming a disabled child, she had created a perfect storm of media attention, public outrage, and potential lawsuit opportunities. She could position herself as both a hero who had detected the threat and a victim of the park's inadequate security measures. Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic psychologist brought in to evaluate Karen's mental state, recognized the pattern immediately. This is classic narcissistic behavior escalated to dangerous levels. She creates crises to place herself at the center of attention, but she's lost sight of the consequences her actions have on innocent people. The revelation of Karen's true role in the incident sent shockwaves through the media landscape that had been amplifying her accusations. News outlets found themselves in the uncomfortable position of having to retract stories and acknowledge that they had participated in spreading a malicious lie about a disabled child and his family. But the damage was already catastrophic. Miguel Rodriguez, who had been excited about his first roller coaster ride just days earlier, was now afraid to leave his house. The family had received death threats from strangers who believed the initial reports, and Maria had been forced to take leave from her job after co-workers began treating her with suspicion and hostility. "We trusted the system to protect us," Carlos said during a press conference organized by disability rights advocates. Instead, it amplified lies and hatred against our son, against our family, against our entire community. Miguel didn't just lose his day at the amusement park. He lost his sense of safety in the world. Miguel sat between his parents during the press conference, his small frame dwarfed by the bank of microphones and cameras pointed in their direction. He didn't speak, but his presence was powerful in its quiet dignity. This was the child who had been labeled a terrorist, whose curiosity and joy had been twisted into something threatening and sinister. The congressional hearings that followed were broadcast live on multiple networks, drawing the largest audience for C-SPAN programming in the network's history. Representatives from both parties expressed outrage at the incident, though they disagreed sharply on its implications and solutions. "This case represents a catastrophic failure of our emergency response systems," declared Representative Sarah Martinez, chair of the House Subcommittee on Emergency Management. "A single false accusation shut down an entire state's tourism infrastructure and traumatized an innocent family. We need accountability and systemic reform." Karen Whitfield was called to testify under oath, and her appearance became must-see television for all the wrong reasons. Dressed in a conservative suit and maintaining her air of righteous indignation, she continued to insist that her actions had been justified and that the real crime was the failure to take her concerns seriously. "I was protecting public safety," she declared from the witness stand, her voice carrying the same authoritative tone she had used in her 911 call. If that child had actually been a terrorist asset, hundreds of people could have died. I did what any responsible citizen would do. Representative James Conner of Texas leaned forward, his voice carrying barely controlled anger. "Mrs. Whitfield, are you aware that your false accusations led to death threats against an 8-year-old boy with autism?" "Those weren't my actions," Karen replied smoothly. "I can't control how other people respond to legitimate safety concerns." "But you can control whether you tell the truth or fabricate terrorist threats," Representative Martinez interjected. "The evidence shows you deliberately sabotaged park equipment and then blamed an innocent child. How do you justify that?" For the first time, Karen's composure cracked slightly. "I was never proven to have sabotaged anything. That's just speculation and circumstantial evidence." The prosecution's case, however, was built on far more than circumstantial evidence. Security footage, forensic analysis of the tampered equipment, and testimony from park employees created an overwhelming picture of premeditated fraud and endangerment. Karen's fingerprints were found on the tools used to access the control systems, and her cell phone's GPS data placed her at the park during the exact time window when the sabotage occurred. More damaging still was the evidence of her long-term pattern of fraudulent complaints and frivolous lawsuits. Prosecutors presented a timeline showing how her schemes had become increasingly elaborate and dangerous, culminating in the amusement park incident that had caused millions of dollars in damage and traumatized countless families. The defendant didn't just lie about what she saw. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh explained to the jury during closing arguments. She created the entire crisis from beginning to end. She sabotaged safety equipment, waited for the perfect moment to make her accusation, and then watched as her lies destroyed innocent lives. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts: criminal, tampering with safety equipment, filing false emergency reports, fraud, and endangering public welfare. The judge's sentencing was swift and severe: 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation and restitution payments totaling $3.2 million to cover the economic damage caused by the park shutdowns. "Mrs. Whitfield, your actions went far beyond simple fraud," Judge Patricia Williams said during the sentencing hearing. "You weaponized public fear and prejudice against disabled individuals to serve your own selfish purposes. You caused immeasurable harm to an innocent family and endangered the safety of thousands of people. This sentence reflects the gravity of your crimes and serves as a warning to others who might consider similar acts." Karen's final statement to the court showed no remorse or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "I maintain my innocence and my right to report suspicious behavior when I see it. This conviction is a miscarriage of justice that will discourage other citizens from speaking up when they witness potential threats." As bailiffs led her away in handcuffs, her daughter Ashley sat in the courtroom gallery, tears streaming down her face. In the months since her mother's arrest, Ashley had been living with her father and receiving counseling to help process the trauma of discovering that her mother was capable of such calculated cruelty. The Rodriguez family watched the sentencing from the front row, their faces showing a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Justice had been served, but the scars from their ordeal would take years to heal. Miguel had made significant progress in therapy, but he still struggled with anxiety in crowded places and had developed a fear of strangers that broke his parents' hearts. The broader impact of the case extended far beyond a single family's trauma. Amusement parks across the country implemented new protocols for handling emergency reports, including requirements for corroborating evidence before initiating system-wide shutdowns. Media organizations adopted stricter verification standards for breaking news, particularly stories involving vulnerable populations. Most significantly, the incident sparked a national conversation about the treatment of people with disabilities in public spaces. Advocacy groups used the case to highlight the dangerous stereotypes and prejudices that disabled individuals face daily, while educators developed new training programs to help service workers better understand and support customers with special needs. Wonderland Springs, determined to turn tragedy into positive change, became the first amusement park in the nation to achieve certification as a fully inclusive facility. They hired disability rights consultants, trained all employees in autism awareness, and created sensory-friendly spaces throughout the park for visitors who needed quiet environments to decompress. Jake Morrison, the ride operator who had been on duty during the incident, became a passionate advocate for inclusive recreation. He changed his major to special education and began working with park management to develop programs specifically designed for families with special needs children. What happened to Miguel could have happened to any kid who's a little different, Jake explained during a disability awareness presentation at his college. But it also showed me how much power we have to either perpetuate harmful stereotypes or challenge them. I want to be part of the solution. 6 months after Karen's sentencing, the Rodriguez family returned to Wonderland Springs for a special ceremony. Park officials had invited them to cut the ribbon on the new Miguel Rodriguez Inclusion Center, a facility designed to help families with special needs, children navigate the park safely and comfortably. Miguel, now 9 years old and wearing a bright red superhero cape provided by the park's costume department, stood nervously beside the large scissors. The crowd of reporters, park employees, and advocates waited patiently as he processed the overwhelming sensory input of camera flashes and applause. "Take your time, mijo," Maria whispered, her hand gently touching his shoulder. "There's no hurry." When Miguel finally cut the ribbon, the cheer that went up from the crowd was genuine and heartfelt. But perhaps more meaningful was what happened next. Dozens of families with special needs, children approached the Rodriguez family to share their own stories, offer support, and express gratitude for the changes that had come from such a painful experience. "Your family's courage made things better for all of us," said Patricia Chen, whose son had Down syndrome. "Miguel is a hero, even if he doesn't know it yet." Miguel didn't respond verbally, but his shy smile and the way he allowed Patricia's son to show him around the new sensory play area spoke volumes about his growing confidence and resilience. As the ceremony concluded and families began exploring the park's new inclusive features, Carlos reflected on the long journey from that terrible day when their lives had been turned upside down by one woman's lies and prejudice. "We never wanted to be symbols or advocates," he told a reporter. "We just wanted our son to ride a roller coaster. But if our pain can prevent other families from going through what we experienced, then maybe some good has come from all of this." The Thunder Mountain roller coaster, fully repaired and upgraded with state-of-the-art safety systems, roared to life as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Wonderland Springs. Children's laughter echoed from every corner of the park, a sound that had been absent for too long during the dark months of investigation and trial. Miguel Rodriguez stood at the entrance to his favorite ride, no longer the frightened child who had been falsely accused of terrorism, but a young boy reclaiming his right to joy and wonder. His parents stood beside him, scarred but stronger. Their faith in humanity tested, but ultimately restored by the countless strangers who had stood up for their family when it mattered most. As their car climbed the first steep hill of Thunder Mountain, Miguel's laughter mixed with the wind and the mechanical symphony of the ride. It was the sound of resilience, of justice served, and of a community that had learned to be better than its worst impulses. The view from the top showed the entire park spread out below them, filled with families of all kinds enjoying a day of fun and inclusion. It was exactly what an amusement park should be, a place where joy knows no boundaries, where differences are celebrated rather than feared, and where every child can find their own version of happiness. And in a federal prison 200 miles away, Karen Whitfield sat in her cell, finally forced to confront the consequences of her actions without an audience to perform for or enemies to blame. The isolation was perhaps the greatest punishment of all for someone who had spent her life demanding attention and validation from others. Justice had been served, healing had begun, and the world had become a slightly more inclusive place. Sometimes the most important victories come from the most unexpected battles, fought by the most unlikely heroes. Miguel Rodriguez never set out to change the world, but by simply being himself in the face of hatred and lies. He had done exactly that.